Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Just hello, welcome to this evening. So great to have you here. My name is Monroe Frantz, and I'm the Associate Vice President for Global Engagement and Inclusive Leadership within the Office of Global Inclusion, Diversity, and Strategic Innovation. We're so happy to have you tonight as a part of our conversation. We're very excited to kick off our 12th annual NYU Solidarity Week with to close out our week with our marquee event this evening. Before we get started, we would have closed captioning available today, so you can just access the captions by pressing the CC button at the very bottom of your screen, and then you'll be able to see live captioning happening simultaneous to you enjoying the event this evening. So thank you to our captioners that are actually helping to facilitate that for us tonight. So as we center ourselves into the space this evening and ready ourselves for a dynamic and transformative conversation, I would like to just take a pause and ask all of you to just take a moment to breathe. I'm sure many of us are joining after one Zoom after the next. And I would like to take a moment to just honor our ancestors that have created a pathway for us to continue to exist, for many of us to persist, and as well for us to thrive. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the Wapimpinger, Munsi, Lenape, Canarsie, and Amantinakak peoples whose traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory, those of who we are in what we now call New York, the city of New York, in which we occupy. These peoples are the traditional, current, and future inhabitants and caretakers of these lands, and we need to protect and honor the very people in which that we have taken the land from. So we'd like to acknowledge those people. I also encourage you to find out who's on your land. Like, which land are you sitting on in the space in your localities in the place in which you are in this moment. One great resource to be able to provide you with an understanding of whose land you're sitting on currently is the Native Land Digital, where you can plug in where you are located, and it will give you links and information to the indigenous peoples of your area all around the world. Thank you to Christopher Griffin and to Lady Santos for organizing tonight's event, our members of our team who are just quite fabulous and fantastic. Thank you for all that you do. And to, of course, all the OGI team members who've played a part in making this evening possible. And as well to all of our partners that held events throughout Solidarity Week, and to everyone that has shown up to events, thank you for making a commitment to be in spaces that matter. We want to also thank our graphic designers, to all the people whose labor we don't see at the forefront of events. Thank you for making this event possible. And thank you to everyone again who has made the entire week possible from beginning to end. So tonight's conversation is focused on charging you to think about, where do you want to reflect as you think about creating solidarity and making change? Who should you be building with? And when are you going to take action? So what does it mean to act? It has been a challenging year for so many reasons, and we could go on the long list of reasons why, which I'll spare you for this evening. But as we know, in some ways, we have seen the manifestations of some of our greatest fears and the reemergence of the most blatant forms of racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, xenophobia, etc. This moment is not divorced from the very existing systemic shortcomings in our world that has gotten us to this place at this time. So when some people say we want to rush back to some sense of normal, right? Racism, sexism, homophobia was never created a space for us to be normal. So as we're thinking about reimagining sort of this post-disruption, what does it mean? What will it mean to be in solidarity with communities through immense pain and challenge? What would it mean about how we foster meaningful connections? At times, it can even feel like, is the work even worth it? I must offer it is. Tonight, we'll tackle some of these very questions and topics and reflect on what do our communities need to see true sustained change. We will pay homage to change agents from the past and to the present that have taught us so much about what it means to be willing to have the audacity to speak up, and to be bold enough in the moment of adversity, to be bold enough to speak up, to organize, to be bold enough to put their lives at risk, to be bold enough to step out even when it's not popular to do so, to be bold enough to put sometimes their families, their loved ones in harm's way. Tonight, we will honor those people in which that create a pathway forward for all of us. When I reflect on my heroes and sheroes and those that have impacted me in such deep ways, of course, first I think about my great-grandmother and the legacies of like really powerful Black women who make incredible impact in our world. And I also think about James Baldwin when he wrote, "Nothing ever that is ever faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced." So we must do our activism from the place in which we have the greatest sphere of influence, the place in which that we have the least amount to lose, right? And so the place of privilege, from the place in which that we have advantages. This is our time to organize. This is our time to reflect. This is our time to speak truth, to build communities, to be inspired. This is our time to love radically. And loving radically doesn't mean that you let people off. Loving radically is to having the audacity to call people in and to hold people accountable. That's what love is during a time of challenge. Love is being in deep conversation with people and fighting with a sense of purpose for a cause you're passionate about and something you want to affect deep change around. So the essence of true revolution is as simple as a person getting up every single day and refusing to accept injustice as a form of normal. It's as simple as being willing to say, this is not right, this is unjust, or this is unfair. It is our collective responsibility in any way in which that we can, especially from the place we can impact change the greatest, to show up and take responsibility. So tonight, you've already started to do that by being in a place like this evening. I don't know about you where you are in the world, but tonight, this evening, I'm in New York City. It's quite nice out. So I know many of you could have made choices to be in other places. So thank you for making a commitment to your learning. I don't know where we'll be from 2 years from now, or even for 2 weeks from now. But what I do know in this moment, we need people who are willing to make change. Our liberation is tied in with each other. We need to be seeking, we must seek freedom. We must be a part of the revolution. And it will take all of us to create a revolution. And it will take all of us to ensure that those who experience the greatest degree of marginalization, that their lives matter too. I hope tonight that you'll be willing to learn something that you can use to help make our institution or our world better, a better place, by centering those people in which that often go unseen. I hope you take, going back from our theme this evening and for Solidarity Week, and spend time reflecting on how you want to show up in the world. What do you need to do to build a better future? And finally, where are you going to take action? What will you do after tonight's call? What do you need to recommit to? What more do you need to learn? Or who do you need to build and be in conversation with? And I'll leave you before turning it over to my wonderful colleague, lady, with this quote from Yuri Kochiyama, who says, "Our ultimate objective in learning about anything is to try to create and develop a more just society." So tonight, I hope you'll jot down those notes in the ways in which that you can create a more just society and make a commitment or recommitment to what you can do to impact change. Once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you to our panelists for saying yes. Thank you for giving of your labor and your time this evening for us to have more imaginative futures around what we can do differently. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my dear colleague, Lady Santos, our Assistant Director within the Center for Multicultural Education and Programs, and of course within OGI as well, to take us further into the program. Thank you again. Thanks once again to our speakers and to everyone that's made this event possible. Have a great evening. Enjoy tonight's event.
Thank you, Monroe, for your wonderful words. Every day I'm reminded and reignited by the work that we do. And so thank you, so very thankful for your words today. And so I wanted to speak a little bit more about Solidarity Week and what that means to us. It's our 11th annual, our 11th celebration. So we really wanted to ensure that we continue the tradition of celebrating Solidarity Week. So at a large urban institution with hundreds of micro communities, it is often challenging to foster meaningful cross-cultural interactions, especially now in the world that we're living in. And Solidarity Week creates opportunities for students, faculty, and administrators to deepen their understanding of the experiences of others. and raise awareness of the individual and collective injustices that confront many in our society. Solidarity is an ongoing practice that reflects a commitment to others out of the recognition that we all have a shared responsibility towards collective freedom. And I know you'll be hearing this term a lot, many times throughout today, that collective feeling. In the words of Muri artist, activist, and educator, Leela Watson, if you have come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. Solidarity calls for a deep recognition of humanity in one another through self-reflection, intersectional coalition building, and collective action. As the vulnerabilities of our institutions, organizations, and social systems continue to be uncovered, we can collectively hold one another accountable and strategize how we're doing today, organize and build trusting relationships to address the systemic factors that are at the roots of these issues. For tonight's event, we will be engaging in meaningful dialogue and conversation with some community activists and leaders as they discuss the importance of self-reflection, intersectional coalition building, and collective action toward a framework that emphasizes solidarity and sustained justice. Here's my colleague, Christopher Griffin, who will introduce our esteemed guest for this evening conversation. And I will not let this night go without saying thank you, Christopher, for your dedication, your light. It has been such a pleasure working with you through this.
Same here, lady. No, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Monroe, for your words. Lady, thank you for your words and your energy and for this collaborative effort for this event this evening. So hello, everyone. My name is Christopher Griffin. I use he, she, and they pronoun, and I'm the Assistant Director of the NYU LGBTQ+ Center within the Office of Global Inclusion, Diversity, and Strategic Innovation. And I have the honor of introducing our wonderful, esteemed guest for tonight's conversation. I hope you are all excited as much as I am. I cannot wait to hear the words and wisdom of these folks. And so I'll ask our panelists to turn on their cameras when I call their name. So first we have Dr. Kevin Nadal, pronouns he, him. Is a professor of psychology at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice and the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. He received his doctorate in counseling psychology from Columbia University in New York City and is one of the leading researchers in understanding the impact of microaggression or subtle forms of discrimination on the mental and physical health of people of color, LGBTQ+ people, and other marginalized groups. Kevin is a national trustee of the Filipino American National Historical Society and a co-founder of the LGBTQ Scholars of Color National Network. Welcome, Kevin. So excited to have you here today. Next, we have Ianne Fields Stewart, pronouns she, her, they, them. Ianne is a Black, queer, lesbian, and non-binary trans feminine New York-based storyteller working at the intersection of theater and activism. Their work is dedicated to interrupting the exclusivity of luxury by making things like entertainment, nourishment, and self-care accessible to the most marginalized in their community. Ianne is also the founder of the Okra Project, which seeks to address the global crisis faced by Black trans people by providing home-cooked, healthy, and culturally specific meals and resources. Hello, Ianne. It's so lovely to see you. So lovely to see you. And then last, but certainly not least, everyone, we have Madonna Thunderhawk, pronouns she, her. Madonna is an Wemnupa Lakota and has an extensive history as a Native American civil rights activist. She was a leader in the Native American movement, AIM, and a key organizer against the Dakota Access Pipeline. In 1974, she co-founded Women of All Red Nations, which focused on the health and rights of Native American women and combating the commercialization of American Indian culture. She currently works as the tribal liaison for the Lakota People's Law Project and fighting the legal removal of Native children from tribal nations into the state foster care system. I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our guests who are with us today. And I will let Kevin, Madonna, and Ianne take it away with their words and wisdom.
Hi, everybody. Let's all unmute ourselves so we could have just like a natural conversation as opposed to that Zoom where people like reach over as they're about to speak. But, you know, I just want to say thank you, first of all, to NYU and to Christopher and Lady for inviting us to speak. I'm honored to moderate the conversation with two amazing, phenomenal activists. I've been reading up on some of your work and I'm just really astounded and quite humbled, honestly, just to be able to be in presence of you both. So thank you both for being here with me and with us and with our community here. You know, they gave us some questions that, you know, I could use to facilitate our conversation. And we might get to some of those. But, you know, I think one of the things that's really important for me, especially these days with everything going on in the world, is to start off a question that I think we should be asking each other right away. And that is, how are you? And I just want to hear from both of you. How are you? What is going on? How are you feeling?
Madonna, why don't you start?
I'm good. Nothing real, nothing new, nothing special, but you know, I'm doing okay. You know, I have my family, of course, and I help do care for my great granddaughters. You know, with this COVID, they're still doing online school. So, but other than that, I'm kind of I don't know how to explain it, but I'm just totally in awe of all of you. I never thought I see things on social media and the news and stuff, but you never think you're gonna actually see and talk to people. You know, I think, I mean, like this, you know. So I'm totally impressed, and I'm just kind of excited. You know, I hope I do a good job.
You
thank
will.
you.
The feeling's mutual.
Thank you.
Good to hear. How about you?
I'm doing all right. I think that I'm sort of observing the changes in our culture as like the vaccine comes out, as you know, sort of the possibility of stepping into whatever is next for the society and for all of us, as it becomes more and more of something that we have to grapple with and start to really think, you know, it's no longer sort of the conversation of once this happens, it's now kind of a conversation of, okay, like there's growth, there's movement. And I think that with that growth and movement comes some growing pains. You know, there's oh girl, now I gotta be outside again where I have to dress and like put on pants. That's not normal. That's not natural. So I think just trying to embrace change and also stay true to the energy that was cultivated last summer and make sure that it remains sustainable.
Yeah. I'm glad to just, you know, start off with that. And I just wanted to start off with that because somebody asked me today those three words, how are you? And I first started off by saying, things are fine, you know, just busy, blah, blah, blah. And she was across the Zoom from me, and she's a trained psychologist. And in her eyes, she knew I was lying. You know, she was just like, okay. And I had to tell the truth. I said, I'm not okay, actually. You know, there's so much happening in our world, in our country. And I think, you know, this is a real time for us to really, you know, just ask each other how we're doing, and for us to, if we're ready, because that's the other piece. We might not be ready to tell people how we really are doing. And maybe we might be in spaces where people might not be willing and ready to hear what we have to say about how we're doing. But I hope in solidarity with each other, like we can really create spaces where people can actually say how they're doing. You know, I know for me, why I'm not doing well is like, I hate that this world is such that so many of us might be hurting for so many different reasons. And it's just business as usual for people, you know? Here I am as a person of Asian descent, walking down the street afraid, knowing that people of Black ancestry or Black people or people of Indigenous ancestry walk around feeling afraid for different reasons. And yet we have to then show up to work. For some of us, we just turn on the computer and that's how it starts. And it's business as usual. So, you know, that's how, where I am right now is just this sense of it's exhausting. You know, I appreciate just having the space to be able to share that with you both. And you know, it's as if no one's watching because I just see both of you. But you know, I just wanted to start off with that. Like, I hope that maybe we can, you know, with each other and with our own loved ones and chosen family, you know, really check in on each other, you know, and that's something I've appreciated this week and these past few weeks is just people checking in and just organically, right? Like, I mean, one of the things that we saw last year with all of the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, people were saying, check on your Black friends. And then Black folks would say like, but we're not friends. Why are you checking on me, right? And I felt similarly with this round, people checking in on me. I was like, you have never asked me anything about my life. And now all of a sudden you're checking in on me. So don't just check on your friend or check on your friends, but don't check on people that you're actually not friends with. So anyway, I want to just bring it back to you all. We're talking about solidarity. What comes up for you when you think about solidarity, and how has the meaning of solidarity changed, transformed, or meant different things for you in different times of your life? Maybe we could start with Ianne this time.
Okay. I think solidarity for me is simultaneously a complicated and very simple concept. The simplicity of the concept is that I stand with those with whom my just as the quote was said earlier, you know, I stand with those and in solidarity with those whose my liberation is tied up in, and I think that requires, you know, expanding our understanding. I have loved and known folks of, you know, Black communities and Filipino communities, Black communities and Indigenous communities, people who come from both of those communities, all three, you know. And so I think that it is for me, the simplicity of the understanding is that I understand that I cannot be free if, you know, if it is based off the oppression of others, or if my freedom comes with sort of like, you know, the caveat of that someone else must be oppressed. I think that it's complicated for me in that, I mean, I'm, you know, I've been raised in the theater, and so the theater is still very much my home. And recently there was a panel that was held focused on the violence against AAPI folks. And I think that it was so meaningful to hear from my AAPI siblings and to hold space with them. And also there was a great deal of pain because many of them seemed to feel as if the discussion of anti-Blackness is somehow taking up too much space. And I think that this is why I have a bit of a distrust of, you know, spaces that are coded as BIPOC or POC spaces, not because I don't trust other communities, but because too often I've encountered circumstances where anti-Blackness is treated as if it's sort of like, oh, well, we know what that is, but really, you know, I want to talk now. And it's like, well, I don't think that we can just act as if anti-Blackness is something that we can just sort of throw away. And so I think that that's why solidarity is a really simple concept, because it's like, yeah, at the core of it, I want everyone to be free. Anyone who is oppressed, I want them to be free. And on the other side of it is that I don't want, for too long, I as a Black person, I as a Black trans woman, and my community have for way too long been always sort of told, well, wait your turn. Yep. And it seems like as soon as there is sort of a cultural shift where we have a moment that is seen as, you know, I've said before that, like, I think Black trans production or like whatever our culture is seen as a public commodity. And so whatever we accomplish is seen as something that everyone should have a piece of. And so I think that's what complicates solidarity for me. specifically as a Black person, is wanting to make sure that I can still be focused on my liberation and support the liberation of others without having to sacrifice my own people and my own efforts in the process.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I mean, I think a few things that I'm thinking about is that you hit the nail on the head at the end when you said it's an and. It doesn't have to be an either or. And I think so many times people are so limited in this either or sort of way of thinking that, yes, you can be the target of anti-Asian violence and still be a perpetrator of anti-Blackness. And there are ways that we can have those conversations that are complex and nuanced and painful and hurtful while still showing and embodying solidarity. And I think, one of the things that's been really on my mind, especially related to what you're saying, is just, some folks who are so intellectually, aware of like terms that they're supposed to use, but then behaviorally and even emotionally, like they're not really showing that solidarity, and that's frustrating even within Asian American communities, because, then from my perspective, some of the things that I have witnessed are the ways that many Asian Americans in general are unwilling to not just talk about anti-Blackness, but also unable to talk about things like colorism or misogyny, sexism, heterosexism, transphobia, and so forth. And then when you say something, you get accused of trying to bring us all down, or we're just fighting, and we're not fighting. We're actually just pointing things out that most of us know to be true if we have those historically marginalized experiences. But I thank you.
If I may, something else I want to add to that is that I didn't say it that well earlier, but what I am also naming is I think that for those who are both Black and Asian, whatever that may be, whatever that may look like, for those who are Black and Indigenous, for those who are Black we have to see each other as interwoven. We have to see each other as equally invested, because I cannot act as if, the struggles of the AAPI community don't affect the Black community when I have loved, known, and organized with those who exist at the intersection of both of those identities.
Sure.
And so I think I just want to add that in there, that it's I think also, I don't want us to kind of act as if these two things are well, we should do this. It's it already exists. Mm-hmm. The reality is that we are already in a place where our struggles are interwoven, just as our liberation is interwoven. And we don't need to kind of act as if the two are separate. They are together. And also there are differences in what we need, and that all of that can exist in the same time. Yes. Yeah.
Agree. Madonna, any thoughts so far?
Well, very interesting to me. Very interesting, because there's so many things going on nowadays, these days of all kinds of, we know there's always been conflicts, and how society is, and I've watched it since the 60s, when the first big awakening happened in this country. So it's just, to me, it's kind of like a progression, I just kind of see the ebb and flow, but I think it's really good for all of us in this country, regardless of what circumstances are, that others are able to rise and see their power. Because in our ways, and I can't speak for all, of course, all Indigenous to this country, but most of us, the Northern Plains, we have similar culture and history and stuff, and we always have had our ancestors and what we call two-spirit. Mm-hmm. And the labels that are now, sometimes I forget, I can't keep up with LBG, those letters and stuff, but we know it just as a concept of two-spirit. Mm-hmm. And it's so strong and such a part of existence, that why has it been an issue in other societies, Why would you do something that the Creator made, Anyway, but it's interesting for me to hear all these perspectives, from you young people, because, with me, it's always been progression of learning, and learning these things. But for solidarity purposes, like I say, most of us in the Western part of the United States, in the states where there are Indian reservations. Some of them are smaller reservations, some of them are large. So it's always been a land struggle with us, always been an issue of land, which we are of the land. So of course that takes on everything, you know, family, extended communities, you know, in our nation to nation relationship with the federal government. I mean, who knows about that? You know, who knows that that's our standing. That's why we can make a stand like we did at Standing Rock 4 years ago, you know, because we know our inherent rights. We know what our ancestors, the treaties they made with this federal government they're ratified by Congress. So of course that makes them the law of the land. But since we're outnumbered by everybody in our own land, you know, and we don't have the political power or the economic power, we depend on solidarity that helps us in our modern day existence. So whatever that entails, whatever level that is, solidarity is very, very important to us, and we recognize it. And for example, my people, we're Dakota, 3 dialects. On the western part of the state of South Dakota is the Lakota. But that word means allies. That's what that means, because we were a nation, a large nation. So we were gathered, there's seven bands of the Great Sioux Nation. And they're, what else would you call it but allies? Because each band was separate and moved separately, but came together as allies. So we understand that concept for survival, but not only survival, but to flourish in the modern day. So I'll say it again, you young people are amazing. I'm so proud of you. Makes me feel good.
You're amazing as well.
And we learn so much from the generations. I mean, just knowing about all of the activism you've done throughout your life has been so, I'm so humbled just to be in your presence right now. And so thank you for showing us how to do things, and you know, to stand up for what we know is right and just, and what we deserve as our basic human rights, and for, you know, whatever it is that we need to fight for and advocate for. You know, one of the things that, you know, I've been thinking about is just this idea of like solidarity isn't just like, you know, we are nice to each other, but it's like we're working with each other because there is that power in numbers. And as many of us realize through our own activism work is that if we don't have those numbers, sometimes people just won't listen to us at all. I mean, they're still not listening to us, but they're listening a little bit more if there are more people involved. And so I think, you know, it's even just something for us to think about. It's just like from even earlier generations, it was a practical strategy for groups to work together in order for movements to thrive. You know, and I'm wondering, Madonna, if you could tell us a little bit about, like, you know, what has that been like, you know, to see these solidarity movements over time, especially like in your work from the past few decades, and then just what does that look like now in terms of working with other communities, historically marginalized communities, other indigenous groups, or place people. Now you have access with social media to people from all over the world that you can work with. What does that look like over the years?
Well, I think, like I said before, the issues and the involvement and the solidarity that went on would ebb and flow over the years. But in the last decade or so, because of social media and the interaction that people have, the instant everything, you know, that's really, I choose to look at the positive, you know, look at the things that are helping. And it's so important that we've been able to, as a people, we've been able to keep up with that. You know, our younger people have been able to access those, you know, that kind of technology and stuff. So but it's always been real basic. Our struggle has always been real basic, and that, of course, is survival in this modern day. And we've learned words like colonization and what that means. And the more I understand the rest of the country, and the more I look around, good grief, capitalism and those kinds of words, I mean, I think everybody's colonized, because people think in those terms. What over the decades, what I've seen happen is, it seems two things always take precedence, if that's the word anyway, and that's greed and racism. And it affects all of us all across the board, regardless of what race, who you are, those two things, greed and racism. I mean, just look at the politics, in the recent, 10 years or so. I mean, progressive left wing, whatever you want to call the left, whatever name, all kinds of issues, everybody going in all kinds of different directions. And what did the right wing, what did they have? Two things, greed and racism. Boom, they were in. They took over the government, both houses and the White House, Well, and that again, there, of course, you can talk anything, to death. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. But to me, it's basic. Because when you're looking at it from a standpoint of small in numbers as my people are, but we are land-based. And what does that mean, land-based? We're the only ones in this country that can say that. We're land-based. If anyone else, non-Indigenous and aren't land-based, if they don't pay their taxes, they're homeless, or they got to do something else, but we'll never be homeless. We always have a land base. Our ancestors saw to that, okay? So it's to me, it's just, it's important that in the struggles that I come from, that we understand and try to learn from other people in the country and their struggles, because in the end, it's got to be, we can't be splintered. We've got to pull together in solidarity. That word is so important. I love that word. I mean, when we first got involved as a people with the American Indian movement, and our elders said, you go to the world community and tell them that we're still here and who we are. And so we did. And, and that was when I first, my eyes were open to colonizing and stuff that went, I mean, I knew about it, the rest of the world, but I had never met people that actually, that happened to, and it was still going on. And so, just the idea that there's nothing new, but what's new is people's involvement. And when they wake up and what they do. So for me as an elder, this is one of the best times, because the young people are on the rise. You're all on the rise, and in your life, what you do and who you are, you're on the rise, and that's the way it should be. And the elders, we watch and we support, because that's what I had when I was young. We always knew our elders would show up, and they always had our back. They didn't preach to us. They didn't, sit down and tell us what to do and stuff. They were just there. They just showed up. And if we asked for advice, they gave it. If we didn't, they just smiled, let us know they were there. So that's what my world is now, and I love it. There's so much going on, it's exciting. Our young people back here at home, they're still fighting the black snake, the pipelines are still there. Politics is politics, but we still have to protect, and that's where we're at. So we understand the value of solidarity, and that it's, but the struggle is continuous. Yeah. The more you do, the more there is. Mm-hmm. So, but that's good. Keeps everybody busy.
Ianne, do you have anything to add? Like, how has solidarity changed, or how has it affected just even like your work? I mean, this past year with, you know, the movement for Black Lives, people think it started in 2020. It did not start in 2020. It's been here forever. And the name Black Lives Matter started in 2014. But now people are starting to pay attention. And now you're seeing people that had never gone to a protest show up to a protest. And now we're seeing people, you know, move out of the way and listen to our Black trans sisters and siblings lead marches. And, you know, what has that been like, you know, just to witness all of this, both positive or negative or anything, you know, observations for this moment in time?
Well, first thing I just want to thank thank you so much, Madonna, for everything you're saying. I feel like positively challenged in thinking about Indigenous and Native folks' identities as land-based. And the word, and I don't know if this is right, but the word that came to mind when thinking about my own people was like shipwrecked, that we were kind of brought here and expected to build, and that we kind of exist in the relationship that we have with both land and the physical space that we've built, and the process of gentrification, how we get moved out of our homes. And I guess I bring all that up just to highlight sort of the ways that I see our solidarity, and I see how it can, and I see how our stories interweave. And I just want to thank you so much for that. In terms of kind of, I was on a panel and someone referred to it as this past summer as the Freedom Summer 2.0. And so I've adopted that language and I really enjoy it. But again, there's the simple answer is that I, as someone who, you know, organized the Brooklyn Liberation March and spoke in front of 15,000 people who marched for Black trans lives, I, as someone who founded an organization that was a collective in 2018 to May 31st of last year, and then suddenly became a fully fledged organization. I, as someone who has sort of benefited from materially from the growth of from that growth. I would feel ungrateful to say that I don't see the change and feel the change. And there is a gratitude to seeing how those conversations are shifting, not just for me, but for my community, for seeing my sisters, my siblings, my brothers, experiencing so much growth and so much, and beginning to be like, could this really be happening? And on the other side of it, we're holding a trial for a murder we all saw. Where all of one of the reasons that any of this happened is because Nina Pop, Tony McDade, Dominique Remy Falls, Raya Milton, all of these people are gone. And so I think that in terms of, I think that's been one of the strangest parts of this journey of the last year for me, as my life has changed, as I suddenly am on panels and talking to people, is that all of this is happening because someone else died. And that doesn't feel like freedom. That doesn't feel like liberation. That doesn't feel like growth. And it doesn't feel that way when I talk to my trans siblings who still can't get a job, who still can't get secure housing. And these are not people who are far away from me. These are people who are right next to me, who I'm doing everything I can to help, and to share in the fortune and the good fortune that I've received, And so I think that, we have so many more people and figureheads who can step forward into the light. And I think that there is such a necessity to step into the light. We need to see more, we need to see and be seen. And with that comes the struggle. As Pose is wrapping up its 3rd season, everything that show has done as far as showing people, who we are. Thinking about, Asani Arman and Jordan J and Nala Simone Toussaint, and all of these incredible organizers who are my friends, siblings, and fellow and comrades, to see them grow and develop and be seen is joyous, because I know that, had I had an Asani Arman when I was growing up, had I had a Nala Simone Toussaint when I was growing up, like what could have been possible had these conversations been happening? And I don't for a second deny the immensity of what that means. Right. And also, what about for the people who don't have that platform? What about for the people who are like reaching out to these organizations that have grown up and saying, hey, I have nothing and I need help? And I think that is what's difficult to, and I think that's also like, in many ways, the difficulty of being an organizer is that you hold in one hand, you hold, I see firsthand how things can change. And I see how I can be part of that change. Yeah. And in the other hand, I see that things are still not right. Yeah. There are still, members of my community who are being pushed out of employment because of their neurodiversity. There's still members of my community who just can't even get into a home and have everything they need to get into one, but cannot get into a home for whatever reason. Right. And so I think that it feels disingenuous to act as if there are not things to be grateful for. And it feels disingenuous to act as if we have suddenly arrived in a moment because of a year. Yep. When we think about everything that, Black trans people have been through, when we think about everything that Black people on the whole have been through, how can we say that a year is enough to say things are better? And so for me, it's almost like I never intended to see the results of my work. I am not here to, not to be too heavy-handed with a metaphor, but I am here to plant a garden, I am not here to, I'm not here to necessarily see it bloom. Right. And so having moments like this, it's so beautiful. And I cling to it. And it's what reminds me of like, this is why you keep going. But never forget that the work that all the people whose shoulders you had to stand on to get here, now you must make your shoulders ready. Right. And so I think that both of those things have to exist at the same time, because I'm not satisfied and I want more. I want all of my sisters to walk out in the street and never have to carry weapons with them for defense. I want all of my brothers to feel seen, whether they have binders or not. I want them to feel seen when they step into space as who they are. I want my siblings to not have to constantly fight for themselves to be seen as one of us. Yeah. Right? So I hold all of it. I hold the joy and I hold the rage and I hold the grief. All are possible, and all I feel like have to be possible for us to authentically talk about where we are. Also, sorry, I keep on with this fan, but I'm from the South, honey. I can't sweat too much. I gotta just listen. So,
I mean, it reminds me of Madonna, what you had said earlier, just that the more you fight and more you fight for change, there's more work that we have to do. And I appreciate the honesty, Ianne, of just, yeah, like there are certain things where we see some movement, we see some change, but yes, there's still so many realities that people are still oppressed, people are still homeless, people are still getting killed, people are still on the border, separated from their families, people are still afraid to walk down the street for whatever reason because of one of their identities. And that still just isn't justice, that's still not freedom. And we need to do whatever we can to fight for it. I think one of the things that's so hard for many of us as organizers, and especially BIPOC organizers and BIPOC organizers who are trans or queer and have other marginalized identities, is that it's so hard for us to walk away from it and say like, I'm going to let someone else take care of this. But with people with privileged identities, they can turn it off and they can go to brunch and they don't have to go to the protest and won't feel bad about not going because they can easily say that other people will do it. And, it feels like I'm angry about that because they get to do that. And at the same time, like I feel guilty if I don't do something. And if I do something that I feel feels selfish in some ways. And so what's the medium? Like, how can we not burn ourselves out, which we know activists, organizers people of color, especially, occupying spaces that weren't meant for us, how can we preserve our souls, our energies, our loves, our spirits, our hearts, while also not ever being complacent? I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts, not answers, just thoughts. Madonna, do you have any thoughts?
Well, in this world of Zoom we've all been in for the past year, I get that question quite a bit. I noticed, among others, but yeah, it just seems like in my circumstances, it's almost like because we are in the struggle we've been in over the the decades, that we are more like a struggle people of our people, so locally it's always strong families. So it's almost like whatever age you're at, you have a place. That your age group is doing this, it's kind of like you just evolve. The young ones now, we just had many of our young people that went to DC because the pipelines are still here, even though, the KXL was supposed to be, stopped and all of that. They're still, the pipe yards are still there. They're still building their man camps. It's that type of, the state of South Dakota is a redneck state, a red state. And they're thinking, oh, well, we don't have to listen to Biden or the federal government. We'll just do our own thing. So those types of things are going on. So that's, those are in front of our face all the time. So our young people went to DC last week and they marched with, and I was so proud of them. They went and people gathered and they were supported by the Black Lives Matter. Their protection was there, their security. It was so beautiful, And here we were at home. We had to take care of the camp situation because we still have a camp there. On the border of our reservation, where across the border is where the man camps are and where the activities going on. So that the families all support, what's going on. And so there's many of the younger, well, I say younger because I'm an elder, For example, we have a grandmother's group and we have the OGs, the old grandmas, and the YGs, the young grandmas. The young grandmas are all working and raising grandkids. The OGs, we go to all the meetings, because we can do that, So we all kind of have our space and what we're supposed to do, and it's almost like an obligation. So if you pick up that obligation, then that's your choice. So you don't have to feel like, oh man, I couldn't make it to that demonstration. Look what you are doing. Look what you're doing right in your own, space or world or job, whatever it is you're doing. Everybody's important. No matter what they do, they're important. And that's a way, on a smaller scale, we can handle it at home because our issues are I suppose, are more obvious and more, cut and dried, I just imagine that might be how it is from other than real heavily populated urban areas, So, but the fact is that there's a responsibility for everybody, and how you handle it is what that tells you if you're going to be in it for the long haul.
Can I just thank you for that? I feel so validated right now because I went to like 2 protests in a weekend, and I was like, my feet cannot do this anymore. When I was 20, I could march across the bridge and be fine. But now that I'm in my 40s, I'm like, I could probably do one of these once a few months. I don't know. But I appreciate it though, right? Because I think there are so many ways that people are doing their part. And for some of us, like for me, and I have 2 small children at home, part of that is I'm the person that I know my friends call if ever they are to get arrested or that sort of thing. And I'm ready for that, right? And I know what's happening. And that's my role right now in this moment when I can't physically be in certain spaces. So I appreciate that. And I also think that people who are watching at home, that you know, for some people that also validates them. And then for other people that they don't just get complacent and say, see, Madonna said I could stay at home. No, Madonna says you're finding your part. And so if you can do certain things that you should, but you know, for some of us, it's really, you know, finding how we make our communities work, how we work in collectively with our, not just with our own communities, but collectively across in solidarity with others. This is what we have to do. And I appreciated hearing the part of Black Lives Matter protesters the organizers supporting the Indigenous organizers, because that's the beauty of it. You know, I loved going to the Stop Asian Hate marches these past couple of weeks and seeing, you know, all of the street medics and the people leading us, and, you know, all the, I'm losing the name of, you know, all the different people that make it all work. And a lot of them, most of them were not Asian, because they're the ones to keep us safe, and we keep us safe, as a lot of organizers will say. And so, so I appreciate that. And then we, as in solidarity, do that for others too, right? And so we don't do it because it's reciprocal, like you do this and so I do that. We do it because we all believe in it, and we all are in, you know, believers of justice and solidarity. Yeah, Ian, thoughts?
Oh gosh, I mean, how do I follow that? I will say, I think that says it all. Know what you can offer, know what you can do, know what you can bring. You know, it's so funny. This when I started the Ochre Project, this was, you know, this was supposed to be a holiday thing. It was supposed to happen one good time. We were supposed to raise, like, you know, $500 at most, feed a couple people, and say, oh, that's what we did. That was good. And that's not what happened. 3 days after we launched, we had $6,000, and it was like, okay, the people want this, got it, you know? Yeah. And so in that way, I kind of just reacted to the moment. You know, had you talked to me in high school, honey, I would have been on a Broadway stage giving you like, I didn't know nothing about this, you know, none of this. And I think that growing up in the Deep South, in Birmingham, Alabama, you know, as all of who I am, I think that I had to learn very quickly, by being thrown into the fire, essentially, that this world will punish those who are different. And so very early on in my life, I learned what was right and what was wrong. And I felt like what was right was worth fighting for. And it's as simple as that for me. Because I think it is worth fighting for. I think that we are worth fighting for in whatever way that looks like. For me, I also learned very quickly that, you know, surprisingly, especially considering that I co-organized Brooklyn Liberation, but I'm not necessarily a protest girl. And I've judged myself for many years for that. I wanted to be, you know, honey, I wanted the bullhorn, and I wanted the, you know, I wanted it all. And I learned very quickly that I was like, actually, as I'm doing the work as a person to center and celebrate my softness, I've realized that not that protesting can't also have softness to it. Sure. But for me, that wasn't where my softness lay. And it was when I actually went to, there was an exhibit here in New York a couple years ago called Black Power Naps. And it was an exhibit literally just centered on centering Black folks' ability to be lazy and destigmatizing that. And it was all about literally just coming into the exhibit, and there was everything that you could just lay down on and just relax. And walking out of that informed my activism more than I could ever imagine, because I was like, you know who I want to be? I want to be the person that some people come home to and I say, come on in, honey, sit down. Yeah. I got some food for you. I got a nice bed made for you that you can just rest on and sleep. You've been working hard. Good for you. Take some time. Yeah. And I think that when I discovered that, I discovered what my activism was. And I discovered, and that's why I talk about, you know, interrupting, you know, my bio says interrupting the exclusivity of luxury. But, you know, because I had to use my big educated words or whatever. This is NYU after all, darling. But you know, for me, what that means to me is that it's like the experience of luxury to me is that it's something that says you are important, you deserve rest and relaxation, and you deserve to be the most at peace that you can possibly be. And I can think of no people more worthy of that than Black trans folks. I can think of no one who needs that more and who deserves that more. And so I believe in making something that is incredibly luxurious, something that is available to the most marginalized. Because what does that do? You know, what does it do when you have the possibility of not just saying that I'm going to fight, but that I'm going to rest? And I think that that's been kind of a lot of what we're talking about in these years, recently, you know, as we talk, as like the self-care movement grows, right? But I use the air quotes because I think that in many ways it's been co-opted and commercialized and capitalized on. But I truly believe in the power of rest, even if I don't know how to do it totally. But I believe in the power of giving rest at the very least to other people. And so I think in that way, I think that was kind of what I learned. And when I think about, you know, when I become an elder and who I want to be that person that, like, you know, after the protest, the young people come, I open the door, I say, all right, here's the food. Y'all rest up. You can talk and be young selves. I'm gonna go sleep because I'm old and I'm tired. I am trying to be in young people business, but enjoy and rest and enjoy that and enjoy the fire that you have. And so that, I think that in that way, I completely agree with everything Madonna said. Find your place within this. And it isn't necessarily always in the street. It also isn't necessarily online. Sometimes for you, what it may be and what it means, and, you know, to tie it into the theme, what it means to be in solidarity, is to simply sit in silence with someone and hear their story. And to hold it with honesty and with respect and dignity. And I believe in that. I do.
Yeah, I appreciate everything you had to say. You know, I also just want to shout out the Oprah Project for being so holistic in your approaches. I mean, I first learned about your project probably on June 1st, when people are like, how do we donate money to people? And that's Black trans-centered. And so that's when I first heard of the project. But I also became very, what is the word? Like, I was so grateful when I heard of that you were finding funding for Black trans people to get therapy and mental health wellness. And I thought, how amazing. I've never heard of a grassroots organization doing that, to be quite honest, and not just for Black trans people, but just in general. Like, we will find you therapy because we care about your wellness. And, you know, I think that's just so, that's solidarity and that's love. And so you feed people and then you get them to take care of themselves or have spaces where they can share and vent and grieve and heal. That's solidarity. And so I hope others can find ways to do that as well. And then going back to something that Madonna said, I appreciated what you said about the elders. You all just, you support, you show up, and then you listen, and you don't say anything unless they ask you. And that's something, as someone who's not quite an elder, but is older, that I think my generation, like, we still have things we want to say to the younger people, but maybe we have to learn to say, like, no, let's wait and let them ask us if they need our opinions at this moment. But I appreciate that, because I think that it just goes to show, like, just how can we support each other, and especially as elders, to support that fire. And you know, sometimes it is just showing up and listening. So I appreciate that. So we're supposed to be going to question and answers, but I've been enjoying the conversation so much, I haven't really been looking at it. But I mean, we can integrate some of these things. Why don't I just read some of the questions that have shown up, And then we can see if we can answer them directly or maybe just integrate them as we continue our conversation. But one participant shares, can you speak about the dangers of a single story when it comes to solidarity? And then another participant shares, how does colonization of language affect people from different cultural backgrounds? So the first question about the dangers of a single story, and then the second question related to the colonization of language affecting people from different backgrounds. Any initial thoughts on those two questions?
No.
No.
I
was like, it's late.
Oh, I love the honesty of that.
Yeah, that is very honest.
Oh, goodness. Can you speak to the dangers of a single story? I will say that I think that question is a little bit been answered. I think I would say here, I will kind of say what I think has been answered with that, which is to say that I think that the dangers of a single story is that people get left behind and the story gets told over someone or on top of someone. And I think that is incredibly dangerous. I think that we have to, if we are to get free, if we are to be liberated, we have to tell the fullness of our stories. We got to say it with our chest, honey. We got to say it all, and we got to say it proud and loud. Yeah, I think that would be my answer to that. And then just the other question that you answered asked was,
how does the colonization of language affect people of different cultural backgrounds?
Ooh, child. I think I don't know, Madonna. But Madonna, before I speak, do you have any thoughts on that? Because it's a good question, but I'm interested in how to answer it.
I don't understand. I don't really understand what they're asking, because you mean like literally like English words, or
right.
or concept, or what? I don't know.
What I think the person is asking. What I think the person is asking, or at least how I'm interpreting it, is, and please, whoever you are, please feel free to provide clarity if you can. But what I think the person is saying, in terms of the colonization of language, is related to what you were talking about a little bit earlier about, you've just kind of been using this phrase throughout, of like kind of saying like, oh, these words that the young people are using, right, and the ways that some of that language can become very like colonial in its thinking, right? Thinking about, for example, sometimes I've heard in spaces where people are talking about indigenous and native communities, where it's saying, oh, well, we want to give ownership of the land back to native communities. And again, this is from my understanding, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But as I understand the actual work of returning rights to indigeneity, is that native and indigenous folks do not own land, but are the stewards of the land. And so I think that's how I interpret the question of like how does that affect different people? Because for Black folks who are thinking about we want to own what we built, we built this, this country was built like with our hands on our backs, and there is a desire to have I feel a rightful desire to have ownership of that, and to say, actually no, we get to determine some of what happens in this space. Yeah. And then again, that positive challenge that I received from you earlier, thinking about what it means to be land-based as opposed to what I used of like shipwrecked, right? And thinking about, so thinking about like, how do we sort of like communicate with each other about land rights? How, like specifically, I'm thinking between like Black and indigenous and native communities, which also intersect. But how do we kind of have that conversation about what it actually means to fight for land rights when where Black people might desire ownership over the work that we have created, over our cultural and institutional products. There might also be the further struggle of saying, well, this land is not to be owned, it is to be stewarded, it is to be held. And how do we have those cross-cultural conversations?
Yeah, I mean,
the question.
Exactly, right. And I was going to say, like, I'm not quite sure what the question is asking specifically, but I do think there's something about us talking about language and the types of words that we use, how words get co-opted, as you alluded to earlier, Ianne, how certain words that are used in certain communities are now used in other communities incorrectly or not to their original intentions. And so I think in some ways that's colonizing as well. You know, when I also think about language, I also think about just how language grows and changes over time, and that sometimes people forget about, you know, the roots of that language. And so it's really just for us to reflect on you know, the types of words that we use. And then from an academic perspective, or just the fact that we're talking in this academic panel, is for us to even just challenge ourselves on our usage of words. Like, do we always have to use big words? You know I do, and I have to challenge myself on that too, because sometimes that's inaccessible. And if we're being inaccessible, then we're really perpetuating this idea of supremacy in some ways, because people who don't have access to the same types of education or resources that other people might have, they then in of itself may not have the opportunities to have these sort of conversations. So again, I don't know if that's what the question was asking, but I think it's something that we think about. But I also want to just talk about the first question about the dangers of a single story. And I think one thing that I hope that we all can do, you know, beyond this panel, is I think we all just need to tell our stories of solidarity. You know, one of the things that's been annoying me about the media these past few weeks is that, you know, they're really trying to push this Black-Asian conflict. And yes, there has been histories of Black-Asian conflict, and there have also been histories of Black-Asian solidarity. And I think too often those narratives get pushed out. And I appreciate, Ianne, at the beginning you had mentioned, you know, Filipino and Black solidarity, because that for me, that's what I grew up with. That's what I knew to be true. And through the history of Filipino people upon arriving here in what is now known as the United States, Filipinos have had solidarity in movements and actions, in fighting for justice alongside Indigenous people, alongside Black people, but that and Latinx people, but that is just not taught in American history. And so that's something that I've learned from, you know, my own families, my own communities, from organizations that I'm part of. But you would never learn that from mainstream media because they don't want to teach us that. And we'd never learn that from even our educational systems because they don't want to teach us that, if they even talk about some of our groups at all. And so I think there is the importance of telling all of our stories, while also not, you know, erasing or dismissing any of those conflicts, because we also need to tell those stories so that we could learn and grow from those experiences too. But you know, I just think it's so important for us to tell our stories from our narratives too, not from, you know, the outside white person's perspectives, but from our own perspectives, and really understanding that that our histories need to be told through our lenses as well, and to see the value of oral histories, and you know, instead of just relying on, you know, the master's tools of what is known as you know, historical documentation and so forth. So you know, we were going to wrap up soon, but I guess, you know, I just wanted to check in with both of you all about, like, what are some of the things that you hope our audience members might take away in terms of how to be better in solidarity? And I guess one kind of moving that question around is, like, I had learned that this week used to be called Ally Week, and they changed it to Solidarity Week to be more reflective of, you know, just not just the change of language, but also because, you know, maybe being ally wasn't reflective of what they wanted us to be. We don't want to just be an ally in name and say we're going to do things. We really want to move in solidarity with each other. So any thoughts for some practical ways that people can be in solidarity with others?
Madonna, I'm going to talk to you first.
Well, you know, from my, with the way I'm thinking is, you know, it's pretty basic. You know, it's got to be basic. Otherwise, it ends up being complicated, and then you end up in numerous, you know, meetings that go on forever. But anyway, yeah, that was something we learned early on, you know, that there's times that some of your allies in your solidarity movement like meetings, you know, and you know, 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking, wait a minute, you know, I don't know if I want to do this. I mean, this was early on back in the day, you know, but I think again, it has to be because this has been my adult life, okay, and it came from a standpoint of responsibility. I always think in terms of the long haul, okay. So maybe you know, if people are building a career or something and they want this to be part of it, or maybe it's just an event thing, then that's different, you know. But from my perspective is you know, it's really important that you got to be grounded, you know. You got to be grounded for whatever level it is, whatever era it is in your age and all of that, whatever, you know. I just think that in all the issues in any part of the issue you talk about in solidarity over time or whatever events, whatever, you got to make sure that you got it together, because words are words, you know. Meetings, talk, you know, but action, that's another thing. But I think the long haul is really important. If change is really going to happen, then you got to, you know, if that's where you're at, then you know, lead, follower, get out of the way.
Thank you so much. And Ianne, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll leave with a story, because I'm a storyteller, that's what I do. But in the summer of 2017, I was blessed to be chosen to be one of the John Lewis Fellows as part of Humanity in Action. I had a wonderful cohort of people made up of 15 fellows from the US and 15 fellows from countries from all over Europe and beyond. And we met in Atlanta, met different civil rights organizers such as John Lewis, such as Rosalind Pope, who penned the letter from the student organizers during the student sit-ins in Atlanta. And it was one of the most transformative and meaningful moments of my life. And one of the many things I learned from there, and a lesson that I've carried with me always, was a story from Rosalind Pope, who told us about when organizing the nonviolent protests. Not every student who they talked to was interested in nonviolence. There were plenty of people who said, honey, if they pour anything on me, if they get up in my face, it's gonna be these hands. And I said, and they said, heard, understood. And so what they did was that the students who were unwilling to participate in the nonviolent movement would go to class for those students who were participating in the movement so that they wouldn't get flunked out of school. And I thought, you know, that is what I want us, that is to me what solidarity truly is it just as Madonna has said, and as we've discussed, finding the place that you fit in. I think that too often we are sort of made to feel as if we've all read the same books, we all know the definitions of all the words and all the complexities and all the things, and we haven't, and that's fine. So get in where you fit in, honey. I don't think that activism can or should look universal. I think it must be as multifaceted, as nuanced, and as invigorated as is the oppressive system that exists in opposition to our work. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we need healers, we need strategists, we need people who are good at talking across the aisle, because honey, that's not me. It's not. I mean, it may look like it should be me, but it's not me. I'm not the girl. And we need people who can, and I think that what is necessary and important is that if you're going over here to do your work and I'm going over there to do my work, we better know, and we better come together in coalition to know that while you over there doing your work, you're not interfering with what I'm doing over here. Because there are plenty of people who say, who like say that they want to, go in and try to change the system from within. It ain't for me. But if it's for you, I need to know that you are changing it from within. And I need to know that you are changing it so that the work that I'm doing out here can be moving in the same direction. And that story has just always sat with me and always told me, all right, I don't have to take the same approach as you, but we better be eye to eye about what we're fighting for. And that for me is solidarity.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That is solidarity. We're out of time. So I guess I just want to share my last piece that I encourage everybody who's watching to do is when you see people tomorrow, ask them how they're doing. When you see a Black person who you are friends with, not just a stranger who doesn't want to talk to you, but it's who you're friends with, knowing that this trial is happening in Minneapolis, ask them how they're doing. If see an Asian person walking down the street, an Asian woman especially, might be having a hard day, ask them how they're doing. If you see an Indigenous person, see a Latinx person, folks where we know that there's so much stuff going on for all of us, ask each other how you're doing and mean it and genuinely be ready to hear what they have to say and be there for them, and really be willing to offer something if you do ask them how they're doing and how you could help them. So thank you so much. I'm so honored to have been in community with you. Thank you again to NYU for having us. Thank you, Christopher, Lady, for all of your work. And I'm leaving feeling joy, which is something I haven't felt in a few weeks. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. My goodness, I am so energized. I was tearing up, I was laughing. I went through all the roller coasters of emotions through our conversations, but truly, thank you, Madonna. Thank you, Ianne. Thank you, Kevin, for sharing your words, your wisdom, your light, and your love in these difficult times, honestly. I know that I'm a better person having been able to witness this conversation. I was telling folks that, the goal of this event was to be I'm not a fan of flies, but a ladybug on the wall. And it was wonderful.
And we were.
It was wonderful hearing y'all conversation. I hope that folks who have attended tonight feel inspired, rejuvenated, energized, and ready to get to work, because there's a hell of a lot of work to get to and it must continue. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Lady, would you like to share any words before we wrap up?
Well, I think you've summed it up so beautifully. I just have to say that I am completely moved and I feel reignited in the work that I will continue to do, as you all mentioned, that it keeps going and never stops. And I hope that folks walk away with a lot of knowledge from this. And I think that myself, I learned so much and I hope to pass that down, right? How do I inspire others to do the same? And I cannot thank you all enough for your incredible work and your support. Seriously, thank you, everyone, the participants. Thank you, everyone who tuned in today. This could not have happened without all of you. Thank you.
Yes, yes, yes. So let's follow in Ianne's word and let's go rest, y'all.
Thank you all.
Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you, everyone.